right, so good morning, everybody. A very early morning for some of you and good afternoon for others. We are so excited to have you with us here today. My name is Marina Best. I'm a senior social development specialist in ADB's NGO and Civil Society Center. And we're very, very pleased to be hosting this business opportunities session for our civil society partners. We very much value our civil society partners. Oh, sorry, just a reminder, if everybody could please hit mute. So we very much value our civil society partners and hope that, this session provides a lot of opportunities for you to learn a bit more about us and identify ways that we can work together. So just a reminder before we get started, if you can please keep your audio on mute while the meeting is ongoing. Any questions, we will have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation, but you can of course send any questions through the chat box or use the raise hand function. And just so everyone is aware, this meeting is being recorded for documentation purposes. The recording will only stay internal to ADB, but please do send a note to our tech team if you have any concerns about this and we can address them. So now for some opening remarks, I am very pleased to introduce to you Ms. Haidy Ear-Dupuy, who's the unit head of ADB's NGO and Civil Society Center. So Haidy, over to you.
Thank you, Marina. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of our civil society guests and ADB colleagues who may be tuning in to this session. We're very pleased to be presenting this opportunities and learning opportunities for civil society on how to engage with ADB. My name is Haidy Ear-Dupuy, and I am the unit head of the ADB's NGO and Civil Society Center. On behalf of the rest of the ADB, I would like to welcome you to the Business Opportunities session for civil society. This is the second year that we've organized this event, which aims to build civil society interest and capacity for pursuing opportunities to collaborate with ADB in international development and enhance organizations' understanding of ADB, how our organization approaches projects, and our procurement procedures. As we kick off this session, I would like to highlight that ADB's commitment to fostering great collaboration and participation from civil society organization in our projects. ADB recognizes contributions of civil society to development, which is why we continuously look to increase the participation of civil society organization in ADB-financed projects from the design phase through to the evaluation stage. So this business opportunity session is hosted by our unit, which is called the NGO and Civil Society Center, or NGOC. And it's a unit that's been in existence for over 20 years already and is dedicated for civil society engagement. And we are actually the first point of contact for many civil societies who don't know how to engage with ADB or where to engage or who to speak to. We're the first port of entry, and we are the only multilateral development bank with this dedicated function that has lasted for this long. The NGOC is a resource for you all as member of civil society, and you can learn more about our work through our website, which we are updating to share knowledge with civil society from across Asia and the Pacific. Currently, we are developing an operational approach to civil society engagement that will guide us to further strengthen civil society's role and ADB-supported climate development efforts in the region. There are three main pillars under our approach for engaging with civil society. The first is to increase meaningful engagement with civil society in ADB policies, country partnership strategies, and projects. And actually, this session is talking about the projects and how you can participate in the project opportunities. The second is strengthening the knowledge sharing and dialogue with ADB, civil society members, private sector, and developing member countries. And the third pillar is to promote ADB support for civil society engagement in accountability and transparency initiatives in our developing member countries. This event supports the first pillar of the strategic approach, and that is it is intended to help civil society to understand ADB better as an institution and how to competitively bid for projects with ADB. So I encourage you to use this as an opportunity to gain valuable insights on how you can contribute to your country's development effectiveness agenda and maximize your organization's development impact by bringing your knowledge, your field presence, and your expertise into ADB's finance operations. So if you have questions, there is a session at the end where you can ask questions. But beyond this session, you can also email ADB anytime. I think Marina will share with you the email address at the end of the presentation where you can email us anytime, and we'll be happy to talk with you anytime and really share information with you at all on all of the work that we do. So with that, I thank you very much, and I wish you happy learning, and I would like to turn over back to my colleague Marina. Marina, over back to you.
All right, so let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. We are so excited that you've been able to join us today, and also excited to be able to host this business opportunity session specifically aimed at civil society organizations, because ADB, we care very much about civil society and are looking to increase our engagement with you. So this is a great opportunity for us to directly talk to you and hear from you as we learn from each other. So my name is Marina Best. I'm a senior social development specialist in the NGO and Civil Society Center, and I will be taking you through our presentation today. A couple of reminders before we start. And so just for anyone who may have dialed into this morning session, just a reminder, this is going to be the same material. So if you did dial in for this morning, you are welcome, of course, to stay, but this is the same information. And then if all of our audience members can please keep your audio on mute while the meeting is ongoing. If you have any questions, we will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. You are welcome to put questions into the chat box. Given the volume of questions we received at the morning session, we will be looking for hands raised during the question and answer session, and we'll respond to all chat questions as we can in the chat box or in a future FAQ. And then finally, we are recording this meeting for documentation purposes. If you have any concerns about this, please do send us a separate message in the chat box. So without much further ado, I'm very pleased to introduce to you all Ben Graham, who is our Director of Fragility and Engagement here at ADB and has some opening remarks. So Ben, over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thanks, Marina. And hello to everyone dialing in from various parts of Asia or the Pacific. Welcome to this Business Opportunities Fair. So I work with the team in this division that covers both our engagement with civil society organizations, as well as our work in fragile and conflict-affected situations and small island developing states. And thank you for joining and for giving me this quick opportunity to welcome you all and to start this session. This is only the second year of this type of business opportunity fair being organized for civil society organizations. As you can imagine, ADB has been doing this type of session for many years for other types of organizations, namely private sector and individuals that work on contracting and on other business opportunities. But I'm very happy to see that this is an activity that ADB has now been doing for the second year. And we are doing this because, as you heard from Marina, we do care about our partnerships and our engagement with civil society and civil society organizations. We have been trying as an institution to further strengthen how we engage with civil society organizations. There's already a lot of engagement at many levels, but one of the areas that we'd like to strengthen is our engagement through business opportunities. And many of your organizations bring a lot to the table in terms of your on-the-ground presence, your local knowledge, and even technical skills in areas that would complement what we do in ADB. So we're very happy to have this session with you and to share a little bit of information about how you can take advantage of business opportunities with ADB. A little bit on the NGO Center. This is the team that Marina and others here are on. This this team manages ADB's engagement with civil society organizations and civil society more broadly. So it is an important institutional function. Our team works with all the different sector groups, all the different country offices to handle sort of two-way traffic. One is how ADB engages with civil society organizations through its operations, policies, projects, but also to receive information or concerns or communications from civil society organizations on all of these areas as well. So it's a very important function in the institution, and I'm very proud of the team for all the work that they've been doing, including this relatively new area of work. So if you have any questions, not just on business opportunities, but questions in general about ADB and some of its operations, the NGOC team is there to support you. Just a couple more points. This whole effort is part of a broader effort, as I mentioned earlier, to enhance how ADB engages with civil society. And one of the things that we're doing is to develop a new operational approach for ADB that really further articulates how we hope to work more effectively with your organizations in various parts of the region. This operational approach has 3 pillars. The first pillar really looks to strengthen our engagement with civil society through our policies, our country partnership strategies, and our projects. The second pillar is to really strengthen knowledge sharing and dialogue among ADB, our developing member countries, private sector, and civil society, and to strengthen knowledge activities and learning among all of us. And then the third pillar is to try to strengthen civil society engagement in the support of transparency and accountability initiatives in DMCs. What we're doing today with this business opportunity fair falls under the first pillar, really strengthening how we engage with civil society organizations through our business activities. And so we're already exercising this, even though the approach that we're developing is still in the draft stage, but it's good to see that we're already putting some action to it. So I encourage you to learn as much as you can. This is an interesting presentation. I've looked at it. It is interesting because it is really for the first time looking at how civil society organizations can tap into the different areas of opportunity in ADB's project cycle and in other areas of ADB's work. And so I look forward to the feedback that you provide to the team. And I hope you have a very meaningful and excellent session today. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Ben, both for those remarks and for being able to take the time to be with us today. So now we're going to move on into the bulk of the presentation, which is ADB and civil society business opportunities. But before we do that, I do just want to take us back a couple of steps. And if we can go to the next slide, to talk about what is ADB. Oftentimes we get the question, what is your organization? People oftentimes think that we are a bank, and it is true, we have bank in our name. However, we're a very special type of bank. So we're known as what's called an international financial institution or a multilateral development bank. And these were a set of institutions that really started at the end of the Second World War in 1944, when the nations of the world came together at the Bretton Woods Conference and set up the Bretton Woods system. And as part of the international financial system, they set up institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which many of you probably know now as the World Bank. So in the decades after the initial creation of the Bretton Woods system, we saw the development of other multilateral development banks. So we had the Inter-American Development Bank as the first one in the late 1950s, and then our very own Asian Development Bank, which of course focuses on Asia and the Pacific, in 1966. So these institutions are special institutions. They are institutions that were created by governments, and they are treaty-based organizations that sit within the international system. Can we go to the next slide, please? So what is the mission of many of these organizations, and what is the mission of ADB? Now, if you look at our charter, which is our founding document, the purpose of ADB was really to foster economic growth and cooperation across Asia and the Pacific. The charter is still our founding document. However, we've been able to refine that mission over the years. And so today, ADB's mission is to achieve a prosperous, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable Asia and Pacific while sustaining its efforts to eradicate extreme poverty. So we are primarily working with countries on their own development priorities while keeping in mind those efforts to eradicate extreme poverty within the region. Can we go to the next slide, please? So as I mentioned, these organizations are special because they are made up of countries. And so for ADB, our shareholding members are both regional and non-regional. And our non-regional members come from Europe, the United States, Canada, while our regional members are countries across Asia and the Pacific that you see on the map here. And in each of these countries, we have our headquarters here in Manila in the Philippines, but we also have country offices in each of these at each of these locations that you see here. And we further divide our countries between what we call developing member countries and developing member countries. So these classifications largely revolve around the GNI per capita of these countries, and it determines whether they can borrow from us for those development purposes. So many of the countries that you see here are what we consider developing member countries. So they are borrowing from us. We will talk about that in a little bit. But we also have offices regionally and non-regionally in some of the developed countries, so such as Singapore or Japan. Next slide, please. And just kind of going back to that concept again of an international institution, if you look at our governance structure, this really speaks to that international character. So at our Board of Governors, which delegates its power to the Board of Directors, we have our representatives from our member governments. So the Board of Governors is oftentimes the finance minister, the central bank governor, the foreign minister, so very high-level officials within our members. And then here at our headquarters and in our field offices, we have what we consider to be the International Civil Service. So that is our management, our very beloved President Masa and the vice presidents, as well as all of our different departments that are responsible for our operations, all of the support departments, and various others. Next slide, please. So I had mentioned that we primarily work with countries. This is different from many organizations that you may have interacted with before. This is different than many banks, but we do have a small what we call private sector lending portfolio, but the bulk of our lending is to countries. So how does this work? So as ADB, because we have the backing of our member governments, that means that we have a very strong credit rating. And so we can go to the international financial markets and borrow at very, very low interest rates because of that strong credit rating. And then what we in turn do with that borrowing is that we can transfer that to our developing member countries that need support. So whereas a developing member country, because the risk profile is different, may have to borrow at interest rates, say 8-9%, ADB can borrow at 2-3%. So that difference is the benefit that our countries get from working with us. In addition to the financial benefit, they also receive the benefit of ADB's expertise. So our staff is specifically here to work with governments to design projects. So we help them to design transport projects, energy projects, water and urban, a whole range of social sectors, including health and education, and much, much more. But the key takeaway from this is that we are a bank to government. So we are lending to them, we are providing them with expertise, and they are then transferring that into development projects of their own. Next slide, please. So as all institutions, we do have an institutional strategy, and our current institutional strategy is known as Strategy 2030. We have recently been through a very large restructuring called the new operating model that's really been designed to mold the institution in the institution we want to be for the future. And as part of that restructuring, we have what we call the four shifts. So a shift towards climate, a shift towards the private sector, a shift towards new and innovative solutions, and a shift towards new ways of working. So internally making ourselves better. And the shift that I do want to focus on a little bit here is the climate shift, because one of our priorities has been to become the climate bank of Asia and the Pacific. And we are realizing that every single year our climate finance is increasing. And we did almost $10 billion in climate finance in 2023. Next slide. Now, I know that $10 billion in climate finance sounds a lot, but actually, if you look at it, it's only about half of our portfolio. So just to give you a sense of the size and scale that we're operating on as an institution, these numbers are from 2022, but in 2022, we did over $22 billion in lending, and that's both sovereign and non-sovereign. And if you look at the second chart here, if we break this down by region, you'll see that the largest portion of our portfolio goes to South Asia, closely followed by Southeast Asia and Central West Asia. And if we look at the sectors, we have health at the top here because these numbers are from 2022, which is still, COVID spending was still occurring. But we do a lot within, particularly, I'd like to highlight public sector management, energy, transport, again, as well as the social sectors such as health and education. Next slide. And aligning with these figures, if we look at where the procurement by sector is going, in 2022, we saw a lot of procurement in transport. We also saw it in water and urban services, energy, and health. Next slide, please. So now let's move on to, now you've got all this whole history since 1944, plus all the numbers. Now we come to the portion of the presentation that's specifically for this audience, which is, how do we think of civil society as an institution? We oftentimes get the question, CSOs are NGOs, and we have to correct these views among our colleagues, because we do think of civil society much more broadly than NGOs. Civil society organizations to us are organizations that are not based in government and not created to earn a profit. So this encompasses an incredible diversity of organizations that range from NGOs to youth groups to faith-based organizations to universities to think tanks, and a whole range of others. So we define civil society very broadly. Next slide, please. And how do we engage with civil society? Frankly, there's a number of ways that we engage. These are sort of four that we picked out to talk about a little bit more. But we do quite a few consultations and advisory with civil society. We see this particularly on the advocacy front, but we also see it in our major policy reviews. So anytime we have, for example, some of you may have been engaged in the safeguards policy. Anytime we have a major policy, we always engage civil society organizations. We try to engage civil society more and more within our country programming, also within project consultations. So the consultation role of civil society is very important to us. We also engage civil society through project components, which is what we are going to be discussing more today, further on in the presentation. And this is the business opportunities portion. So civil society organizations as implementing partners, implementing different project components. Occasionally, we've had CSO-specific funds. This is a bit rare, but it's not impossible. We currently do not have any at the moment, but that doesn't mean that they can't change in the future. And then we have events and a couple of key partnerships. So we'll talk about those more later on in the presentation as well. Next slide, please. So just looking at this engagement from a different lens, and quickly looking at CSOs from the project lifecycle, I had mentioned that I had mentioned that country programming is one area. So these are our dialogues with government about our strategic priorities, joint strategic priorities with the governments. So CSOs oftentimes will participate in these conversations. During project preparation, this is probably the stage where there's the greatest opportunity for civil society organizations to engage within the projects themselves in doing that very preparatory work, the studies and assessments that are needed, or consultations with communities that might be affected. These are kind of the areas where we oftentimes see the most civil society engagement. I'm going to skip over approval, but I do, because there's not really a role, but I will note that all of our projects are listed online and you can have a look at them. In implementation, this is sort of similar to preparation. This is where we are seeing CSOs engage the most in implementing different project components. And then finally, in completion and evaluation, we do see somewhat of a limited role at the moment, but that doesn't mean that CSOs can't engage here more in terms of independent monitoring of projects. Next slide, please. Okay, so I think this is what the majority of people are probably here for, which is business opportunities. So we get asked all of the time, how can my organization partner with ADB? We have a call for partnership. How do I apply for grants from ADB? The answer is that ADB is not like a traditional donor organization. Again, we are a development bank. Our primary clients are sovereigns. So because of that, we do not accept grants or provide grants, and we do not accept unsolicited proposals. CSOs are, in our eyes, are treated as contractors, and as a general rule, we strictly follow best practices in procurement. So you can find a lot of the rules regarding procurement in the link that I have at the bottom here. And don't please freak out, because I show this slide to people and their eyes get kind of big and they say, why am I here? There are ways that we can partner together. So that is what we are going to cover next in this presentation. Next slide. Okay, so this is the what do you mean slide. This just means, because we don't provide grants, that just means that you are a consultant to ADB. So we are not a donor. You aren't expected to co-finance projects. You will be competing against the private sector, but oftentimes we see a significant advantage for CSOs in competing on price. Next slide, please. So within these consulting opportunities, we sort of have two types of programs or large pools that are being handled where CSOs can engage. So the first of those is technical assistance programs. This is a pool of funding. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by the comments. This is a pool of funding that is internal to our institution. It was $250 million in 2022. These are oftentimes used for small pilot projects. So for example, some of you have maybe seen that we have a challenge for heat stress and gender that's up there. That's being funded through a technical assistance program because it's an innovative new program that's being internally managed by us. The selection for these opportunities is overseen by ADB staff. So that's internal to our institution. I would say the trick here is really getting to know your ADB staff, because they can help you identify those opportunities. Now, the much larger pool of funding that's out there is our sovereign loan portfolio. So that's the 2022 billion that I was referencing before. And you need to remember, if we go back to the model of how this all works, that we are providing financing to the governments, and then the governments are leading on the projects. So the selection for consultants and contractors in this case are overseen by governments. So, I think the trick here then is to get to know your governments, know what projects are kind of out there. They're oftentimes handled by different ministries. And our resident missions in country can sometimes help you with this. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But these are sort of the two big pools, and we'll talk a little bit more how to identify specific opportunities within both pools in just a bit. Next slide, please. Okay, so what types of opportunities can civil society groups bid on? So there's a lot of opportunities out there. I've listed some of them here. Basically, CSOs are eligible for all of these, provided that your organization can illustrate that you are the best choice to deliver these services within the context of the project. You can bid on all of them. We typically see consulting services and non-consulting services as the areas where civil society groups tend to engage the most. So you may wish to keep an eye out for those selections, which again, we'll discuss in just a little bit. Next slide, please. Okay, so, and I'll show you this later as well, but what types of consultants are there? So at ADB, we have several types of consultants. So we hire firms. So that's many civil society organizations can apply as firms. And we also hire individuals. So individual consultants for specific project preparation. And the interesting thing about this is we can also hire individuals through firms. So your organizations can register as firms, but then you can also have the staff within your organizations registering as individual consultants. And those individuals can, represent themselves depending on your agreements with them, but they can also be hired as an individual representing your organization. We also have something called the ADB staffing budget for our staff consultants. This is on the individual level. I just included in here to be comprehensive, but these are individual consultants who work directly with ADB staff and teams. Next slide, please. One of the other things that you need to be aware about is what we call international versus national eligibility. So oftentimes what we see is that the international qualification, the amounts for those contracts are greater, and the same for consultants. And so it's oftentimes very attractive to go for international consulting opportunities. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by the comments again. So oftentimes if you're eligible, you may wish to look at the international ones, but the national ones, they are highly attractive as well. And so I've put down here some of the eligibility criteria that for each of them, but typically international firms, international individuals have to demonstrate a number of years of international experience, meaning experience outside the country where they are based. And so for national, that is, for example, if you are an organization in Georgia and the project is in Georgia, then you would be eligible for the national opportunities. And just a couple of things here. So national, so say you're an individual in Georgia, you're applying to a project in Georgia, you can also apply for the international. If you have the international experience, then even if you are a national of that country, you can still apply for the international qualification. And another question that we've gotten actually even in this morning is how do INGOs do it? Because oftentimes INGOs will have a headquarters and then they have country offices. INGOs can apply for both international and national based contracts. It depends on whether if your headquarters joins the bid. And so an international party is joining the bid, then that would be considered international. Versus if you are, for example, Save the Children Philippines, then your office here in the Philippines could apply for national postings as well. So really actually being on the national side is great because then that opens up both areas that you would be eligible to apply to. Next slide, please. Okay, so I had mentioned before that ADB does follow best practices in international procurement. Most of our procurement is done on a competitive basis. So what does this mean? This means that there is always going to be detailed terms of reference and budget for the position based on the project needs and requirements. And those terms of reference will be posted online. We're going to walk through that system in just a bit. And people will be invited to submit bids and to submit expressions of interest. And then the people and firms will be shortlisted from there and go through a evaluation process with specific criteria that they're evaluated against. And then if selected, go into negotiation and then the formal contract process. So this is typical of a competitive recruitment process across the board. Hopefully not surprising to anybody. Next slide, please. We do have something, however, called direct contracting that you should be aware of. So direct contracting is a non-competitive contracting method where there is not any advertisement and individuals are directly selected. So direct contracting is oftentimes used if, for example, it's a small contract and an individual expert is known for their expertise in this area. They're already known to the organization, and they're uniquely qualified for that small contract. Then we do have the ability to sort of directly select without going through that competitive process. Again, these are for small contracts, and but although they can be used as a stepping stone to larger contracts. So we'll talk about reputation and how you build that later on. But this is one sort of way to get your foot in the door. How you're going to be considered for these, though, this is largely word of mouth. This is your reputation. This is knowing the staff members in charge of projects or the government officials in charge of projects so that they can kind of directly select you and justify the selection based on your unique experience. One way to get on the radar, again, is to reach out to the CSO anchors in our country offices, which I'll show you in just a bit how to identify those people. Next slide. Okay, great. So now we're going to talk about the consultant management system. So I'm just going to share my screen with you all so that we can walk through this. Okay. Hey, Shar, can you see the screen?
Yes, Marina, we can see your screen.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Sam. Okay, great. So, so I want to show you all how you can sign up for the consultant management system. So all of the contracts that ADB is managing are going to go through CMS. You will need a profile within CMS in order to be able to bid on different opportunities. So if you go to Google, type in ADB Consultant Management System. There's screenshots of this at the end of the presentation, which we'll share, by the way. So this is the main portal. And so you're going to need to first create an account. So register here. Sorry, my internet is slow. But you'll go here and register, and you'll need to decide how to register based on what we just discussed, whether you're going to register as a firm. So as a CSO, if you are registering as an organization, you register under consulting firms. And then for individuals, remember we discussed you can register as an individual through a firm. So you can be an individual representing your organization. You can go to the individual consultants portion here. So, and just taking you there, it's quite a simple registration process. You know, it's just basic information that you would have to fill out for any job application. So you fill this out, and then once this is completed, this is your profile for every opportunity that you want to apply for. So it's similar to a job application system where your profile is set in the system. You can update it. I do recommend including tailored. You're going to have to do tailored bids that are specific to each project. So for example, it's the same as applying for a job. You want to create a tailored CV specific to the position that you're applying for. And I also recommend that while you have a profile, I would also recommend attaching different documents and CVs separately. Okay, so this is the registration, and then I'm not going to go through this at the moment because I have another way to show you it. So how you're going to identify opportunities. Once you register, all of the opportunities that are currently open will be in this system, and kind of in this format. It will look very similar. But one of the other things that you can do in terms of identifying opportunities is if we go to the ADB main site, okay, so we're going to go to adb.org. All right, it's just taking a minute. Okay, so up here, there's a button that says work with us. Oh, sorry. The internet is very slow today. Okay, so we have the work with us button. And so what you want to do is go up to this work with us button and go down into the procurement and outreach section. And there are a ton of materials in here. I'm sure you could spend days going through them. But what you're probably going to be most interested in is the projects and tenders section right here. So let's click on that. Okay. And so here under projects and tenders, you can find a list of all of the projects and positions that we currently have open. And this includes not only our technical assistance programs, but it also includes oftentimes many of the tenders that our government partners are putting up there. So you can filter depending on what country you're interested in, what sector you're interested in, and also the type of tender you're looking for. So let's just go down. I'm going to choose Georgia because I love Georgia. It's a great country. So let's look at, for example, this is an individual. Sorry, I'm just going to go back so you can see that. So you can see, so here's an individual consulting posting. So if we click on this takes us to what we were talking about, things looking at like in CMS, right? So this is the type of information once you register and it shows you the full list, it'll take you back to this page. So reviewing this, just sort of key things, what we talked about in terms of the type of consultant, so individual, not firm. The source, so they're looking for a national consultant. So this would be someone from Georgia who would be eligible to apply. There is, for example, the total inputs that will tell you what the expected workload is. And then you can also see how many times it's been posted, right? So this has been extended, so it looks like they're still looking for somebody. And you can also see that this is being really run by the Ministry of Education, Science, and Youth of Georgia. Here is their contact information. I don't know whether to advise reaching out to the contact person. I think that's your discretion. That can sometimes be taken well, it can sometimes be taken not well. So that's up to your discretion. But in addition to this, the other thing you're going to care about is the terms of reference, right? So this is it's basically like a job description. So it talks about the detailed tasks and outputs that are expected for this role. And it will always have the minimum qualification requirements. Please do pay attention to these because these are, again, the minimum qualification requirements. So if you do fit those, you are eligible, you as an individual or you as a firm. So, and then it's the same process really with firms. So you identify the tenders and take a look. You can, again, filter for what you're looking for, and then you can bid on these different opportunities. And the one thing I do want to show you too is that if you go to the bottom of our website, there's something called subscriber services. So if you click on that, what you can do is you can create a new account, and then it will give you email notifications for when things are posted. So you just click here, maybe you don't want to see videos, but maybe for example, business center materials, right? And especially procurement notices for goods and works. So this will tell you when new tenders are posted, so you can go and look at them and see if you might be eligible for that. So while I have you online, the last thing that I wanted to show you was our team's website, which is ADB and Civil Society. So just clicking on that. So we are in the process of updating this. I think Ben did mention that, to put more resources up there for civil society organizations. But one of the things, actually, I think you'll be interested in everything, but one of the things you might be especially interested in is the contact information for our field offices. So as I mentioned before, each of our field offices has a CSO anchor, and you can find their name here based on the country. So for example, if we click Kyrgyz Republic, it's our colleague Aliman, and then you can go ahead and email her if you have any questions. All right, so I'm going to stop screen sharing now so we can go back to the presentation. Okay. Let me pull the slides back up. Perfect. Thanks, guys. Okay. So just some tips for CSOs. So, our website has a wealth of information. As an organization, we've received a number of awards for transparency. We do post almost everything. It's just sort of a matter of going through the website. I highly recommend you take a look at what we just discussed, play around with it, learn what you can. And then that is all part of collecting relevant business intelligence. So, learn about the institution and then figure out ways to come here and network. We have a business opportunities fair that's usually hosted in person every single year. There's a lot of events that are thrown. So Social Protection Week we've had the Asia Pacific Clean Energy Forum. There's a lot of these events that you can get on the radar for and be able to join and come here. A lot of them tend to be sort of sector specific. So find the ones that are relevant to you and then reach out. I would also recommend regularly monitoring the website and CMS for new opportunities. Sign up for those subscriber services that we just talked about. And consider all sorts of contracting opportunities. And when you do consider those contracting opportunities, make sure that your organizations come across as highly professional and easy to work with. Again, you're going to be competing with the private sector. Oftentimes, private sector organizations have people sort of dedicated to these things, but where civil society can really come in is in terms of, its knowledge of the community, right? And so I think highlighting that really gives you a competitive advantage. We also see a competitive advantage in terms of price, but do come across as highly professional. Know your stuff when you do bid on these things. Let's go next slide. Okay, so other tips. English is our organization's working language. I know there's a lot of organizations who've asked us if we can operate in their local language. Unfortunately, we just don't do that. And so, but that doesn't mean that organizations who primarily speak, for example, Russian, can't engage with us. You just need somebody who can communicate with the project officer in English, be able to do some of the documentation in English. We have a lot of organizations who are like this, where there's one or two staff members who kind of handle the communication with ADB, and it's all fine. Also study those bidding documents. We've talked about this again, but think about what the project, what the government, what the ADB staff wants, and think about how you can best meet that, and how do you communicate that when you do submit an expression of interest. And use that information to prepare a very responsive and strong technical proposal. And within those proposals, so here's one of the good things for CSOs, we may not do grants, but with contracts from us, civil society groups can cover all costs and overhead. So even if the project might be let's say a $25,000 intervention in a local community in rural Mongolia, not that $25,000 that goes to the community, you can also cover the cost of your overhead and staff salaries. So, make sure that you're appropriately putting together your proposals when you prepare them. And as part of this, we also suggest that there's a dedicated administrator with strong finance skills to manage all of the contracting aspects and also the financial claims aspects, which we find to be oftentimes a difficult process. So a dedicated administrator with strong financial skills is always a selling point for our project officers because they know there will be someone to handle this. And Organizations also need to keep very good records. You know, we follow best practices in procurement. Records are expected to be kept for up to 5 years. There needs to be good documentation. And finally, performance and reputation. We've discussed this before, but reputation is so important with these organizations. So for every contract that we have, the consultant or contractor who is hired for that receives a performance rating at the end of their contract. And that performance rating, if it's too low, it'll be flagged in the system, and frankly, people will not want to hire you. So safeguard that reputation, because similarly, if there's really strong performance, you not only have a great flag in the system so that people can see that, but there's also word of mouth. People talk about when they have a really nice experience, when something's really been accomplished. So safeguard that reputation for your organization. Next slide, please. All right. So reaching the final portion of the presentation, sorry, I think I've been talking quite a bit. But so the NGO and Civil Society Center, as Ben mentioned in his opening remarks, we are a small unit that is explicitly dedicated to working with civil society organizations. We are a resource that is here for you. So we have our teams, photos and contact information right here. Feel free to reach out to any of us. We would be happy to address any questions or explain anything, and we are here for you. Next slide, please. In terms of what our team does, we provide a lot of institution-wide support across ADB in engagement with civil society. So sometimes this will be in relation to advocacy queries that the institution receives. Other times it'll be in help designing projects with civil society engagement. And we also, so that kind of covers 1, 2, and 3. We also monitor and provide knowledge on civil society engagement across ADB. So we do this through our annual report. We have an indicator that shows how much civil society engagement there's been over the past year. And we also have several knowledge product series, such as our civil society briefs. And finally, we organize a lot of key events involving civil society. The most notable of these is the ADB annual meeting. So I strongly encourage all of you to consider joining one of these. It's a great program that's specifically dedicated to civil society. It's a great networking opportunity to meet your fellow organizations from across the region. And this occurs in early May every year. Next slide, please. So in addition to our core staff, I've mentioned several times, we do have our CSO Anchors Network. Here's a link to our website on this page for when you do receive the presentation, but we have CSO Anchors in every single one of our field offices. So they are also a resource for you. Next slide, please. I had mentioned knowledge publications. So we do have our annual civil society report, our civil society brief series, as well as other publications that we are putting out, such as those related to business opportunities, similar to this presentation. So do check out our website to find these key knowledge publications. Next, please. And then some of the events. We've already talked about annual meetings. Alongside the annual meetings, we have the Asia Pacific Youth Symposium. We've recently kicked off Civil Society Partnership Days, which are platforms for dialogue between civil society and governments within our developing member countries. We do have these business opportunity seminars. And as I mentioned, there's oftentimes a business opportunities fair that occurs in person, which is a great networking opportunity. So take a look at the ADB website for that. It's normally held in the spring. And then we also have civil society conversations where we'll sometimes invite civil society organizations in to talk to our staff about civil society engagement within projects. Next, please. So I see diabetes, Fiji, Marawa.
Yeah, hello, Bula
Bula.
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 Thank you so much, Maria and the team for the lovely presentations. Actually, I just want to raise a few questions. I've raised a few questions on the chat groups, and just a few questions. Before the questions, I want to acknowledge giving us an opportunity, first time for us as an NGO, also as a civil society organization here in Fiji, mainly advocate on the people who living with diabetes, but also we have just the last past few weeks we able to participate on the indigenous movement or something with that ADB is organized about. My question is, in terms of, you elaborate more on about the capacity, about the role of ADB consultant management system, yeah, and how we can, be involved or integrate our programs. My question is that, like for Fiji, we are in terms of health, they have other the government looking into more on the infrastructure and other other development compared to health. So we are more advocate on health, the healthy issues, or mainly on diabetes. So how can how we can access to the support, or in terms of the consulting aspects that you just mentioned, even though that government have other priorities areas apart from health, how we as a CSO can access to the support, or in terms of consulting services. The second question is, I know that ADB have organized a lot of events with other CSO in the past, and how we can be invited, or how, if there's any plans to include the capacity building for CSOs and NGO, so we can have a better understanding and understanding as well, in the roles and the responsibility for us to access in terms of the program that ADB usually provide. That's all from us.
Yeah, so thank you so much for those questions. I'm actually diabetic as well, so thank you for all the work that you do. That's really great to hear. So I think on your second question, what you might want to do is go ahead. So our primary event that we can provide right now at the headquarters level is our annual meetings program. So what I would do is I would send an email to, can we put the ADB Civil Society email into the chat? And we can get you on the mailing list for our annual meeting. And anyone else too, just maybe send a note to that email, and we'll put you on the mailing list and provide you the information. Oh, there it is. So civilsociety@adb.org. And that way you'll be included in like the annual meetings kind of notification. We are looking at developing a newsletter to kind of get information out, and so we can also include you in that, but that's in the process of development at the moment. So that annual meetings is sort of the big event at headquarters. For things that are specific to Fiji, I think your best point of contact is going to be the resident mission within Fiji. And so I think our CSO anchor there is named Beatrice. So what you can do is you can go to that NGO and civil society center website that I showed you. Do you remember? So you type in ADB and civil society, you find our website, and then you go down and you select Fiji, and it'll come up with the name of the civil society anchor. Because that office might be organizing some specific things for civil society groups within Fiji. And then they would be able to tell you about those. And that person is also sort of a key point of contact as well for your first question, which was about, the health sector and where the government's priorities are. So our governments have their own priorities, right? And we work with them to identify what we're jointly going to do together. So for some governments, if their priority is infrastructure, but it's not health, there's not a whole lot that we can really do to influence that outside of the consultations within the country partnership strategy process. But I will say, even if governments have priorities of, again, infrastructure, that doesn't mean that they're not doing health projects. So what we oftentimes see is, strategic priorities, say in energy transport, but then at the same time, every country needs healthcare, right? So they're still doing these sorts of projects. And I think it's really important to talk to that person at the resident mission, and figure out whether the government is going to be doing any projects in the health sector. And even if the government is not doing it, we might be doing it through a technical assistance project. And so that person at the resident mission might be able to steer you in terms of the different projects that are out there and whether there are any opportunities for you to get those consulting opportunities. And that person will also be able to tell you whether, there are any opportunities for civil society groups to have dialogue with government and tell them, for example, that you think they should be focusing more on healthcare. So really that person at the resident mission is the key individual. And so I encourage everyone here to look at our website and look at the CSO anchors online. And if you have trouble finding them, you can always email us. Does that answer the question?
Yes, yes. Thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again for all the work that you do. Do we have, I know I saw another hand up earlier. Any more hands? Okay, let's go to Francis.
Good morning. My name is Francis. I'm from the International Trade Union Confederation Asia Pacific. Thank you very much for inviting us, and also this comprehensive presentation to open more opportunity to CSOs and trade union to be part of the project. Yeah, I also see some questions about this selection process, and in particular regarding the project. The government is overseeing, and they have some concern about this process because, in particular, the trade union at the national levels, it depends on actually the industrial relationship between the government and then trade union, and then trade union likely is likely excluded from this any consultation at this moment. With a serious violation of the labor rights in many countries in Asia. So yeah, that's actually my concern. And second, I would like to share with you. Of course, I'm going to share this business opportunity with our affiliate in Asia. The National Center of the Trade Union in Asia countries in Asia Pacific. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Francis. Actually, I don't know if we have Heidi on. Heidi? Are you by chance on? Heidi used to be our labor specialist, and before she became head of the NGOC unit. So I think she knows ITUC very well, and was going to call on her to speak to you about this. Francis, I very much recognize sort of your points regarding the relationships with labor unions and trade associations with some of our governments across the country, across our different DMCs. And I think a lot of that has to do with not so much what our group does, but our safeguards policy. And have you been involved in those? I know ITUC has definitely been involved in those. But yeah, so that kind of like labor rights and all of that is going to be addressed through our new safeguards policy, which is in the process of being approved by our board. And that will deal with occupational health and safety as well as the rights of different workers. But at the government level, it becomes much more complicated. One of the things earlier in this presentation that I meant to talk about a little was that, we are a neutral international institution, and therefore it's oftentimes very difficult for us to engage in sort of political dialogues that are happening in different countries because our purpose is primarily that development aspect and angle of prosperity across Asia and Pacific. So we typically would not become involved in sort of the dialogues between trade unions and government. I feel like I haven't answered your question though. Did you have any follow on?
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Marina. Yes, the ITUC AP and together with the ITUC Washington office, we've been working together with the ADB, your team, on safeguard policy and the new environmental social framework. Yes, we already had two consultation, and we expect to have another one with the final text, definitely. And ESS2 on labor and working condition, and ESS4 on occupational health and safety issue. Yes, we deeply involved in this process, and also we expect to be part of this process to develop the manuals and guidelines for your bank staff. And yes, but I would like to share. I mean, the Heidi used to work in your position, and we actually had a cooperation to facilitate dialogue through the ADB resident mission in many countries, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, India, and Nepal, etc., etc. So yes, I understand that the ADB is a primary counterpart as a government, and ADB is a political organization, so neutral in terms of politics, national politics. I mean, but I believe that under the new ESF, and the ADB has ADB could play a quite critical role to facilitate the dialogue, and then I believe the dialogue and involvement of the workers together with the employer, I think, is quite critical to make your project
Yeah.
successful and programmatic in the first, I mean, in the beginning place of the project cycle. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Francis. I think we very much agree with you on the point of dialogue. So this is actually why we've started piloting these civil society partnership days, because those are specifically geared toward creating sort of neutral platforms of exchange between civil society groups and government, so that government can sort of directly, it gives civil society a platform to talk about the issues that they're concerned about, and government is there. So we're doing our second one in September this year, and we'll see how that goes, and try to sort of try to tweak the program from that, and have this rolled out across different DMCs. We've also been looking at civil society kind of advisory groups for our resident missions, and including labor as sort of a key group within those advisory groups. That's something on the longer term list of things to do. But that is also like a channel for regular dialogue between civil society, particularly including labor, to have with our resident mission. So we definitely, it is well taken. And I promise that we are working on that.
Thank you, Marina.
Thank you, Francis. Let's go to Ji Young.
Hi, my name is Ji Young. I work at the Save the Children International, and thank you for this wonderful session. I also have some question about the selection process, but I guess a couple of other colleagues also shared a similar question. So I just want you to add that, it would be great if there's some kind of advocacy around CSO engagement in general when the government is deciding the partner beyond individual project, because I know that it's a bit difficult to get engaged and influence the decision by the government. In some cases, we have to abide by the transparency and fair opportunities and so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
I would just say that, beyond the individual project, if, we can actually do more about the advocacy for the inclusive partnership when it comes to sovereign loan, that the government is looking for the partner, then not
Yeah.
necessarily any individual NGO that we are talking about, but more about the government should more engage with the local partner to make
Yep.
sure that the program is implemented in a way that is inclusive. So I think that advocacy platform, if there's any event,
Okay.
maybe one of the occasion that you mentioned, I think I'll be very happy to invite other colleague and our office to be engaged. I think that's just
Okay.
a kind of suggestion, and also if you have
Great
any
suggestion.
kind of the idea, let me know. And my question is that for the specific technical assistant call that you said it's a pilot, and I've seen the recent call about gender and heat and AI and so on and so
Yeah.
forth that is open for CSO as well as the government and private sector. So I if this is going to be increased, because now the current call is about the Bangladesh and Cambodia. And so is it more like a kind of like pilot as in isolation, or do you see more of the increase, like, do you foresee any more occasion where CSO can directly apply for such new areas, such as, gender and heat and AI, that's kind of relatively new area as far as I understand. So do you see that trend? That's my question. And
Okay.
then the second question is, several country offices of the INGO is a register as a local NGO, or sometimes they are registered as an INGO in the country. So in that case, what would be the best approach when we want to register as a firm? So should INGO be registered as a local or national? Is it really depending on the legal status, or should he, look into more about the reality
Yeah.
like we NGO? Yeah. So that's my question. Thank you.
Okay, great. No, thanks so much for those are all really helpful points. I think, so on your first one, it's something that we are trying to do on multiple levels in terms of advocating with governments about the importance of civil society. We've started kind of integrating this into high level visits, these talking points, and just talking about that. And then we've also ramped up our communications within ADB to kind of sensitize our staff to this and have our staff start talking about it more with their counterparts. And also we're starting to see some queries. I just had a query from a government agency in one of our countries asking about how they could integrate civil society into their projects. So that was pretty cool. But if you have suggestions on how we can do this, I think we would really appreciate them, because we are always looking for ideas in terms of how we can do this better. So if you have any thoughts in terms of what might be sort of a helpful platform, or what might be sort of a helpful product, and this goes for everybody in the room, please do send them to us, because fundamentally we are here for you. We want to make this easier for you to understand this institution. So any suggestions would be absolutely great. So then I have your third question. What was the second question again? Just remind me quickly.
Yeah, so the second one is about the technical assistant. I see the, some
Okay.
graph
That's right.
for the CSO. Is it like increasing, or is it just like a one anecdotal? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think with the gender one that you're referring to, this is the gender and heat challenge that just went out. Okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
so that is specific. So what oftentimes happens, I'm going to be very frank here. What oftentimes happens with technical assistance programs is that it's a pool of money dedicated to a specific topic, and then it disappears after 3 years, right? Because the program's done, and then it's time to kind of revitalize it. And at that time, the person who's been working on gender and heat may have left for somewhere else, and it's a new person who's come in, and they have a fundamentally different vision of what they're looking for. So I think that for that specifically, that's sort of related to that particular technical assistance. But gender is absolutely a priority for our institution. And gender is not going away. And gender and heat has been a subject that has gained a lot of attention, because it fundamentally intersects with our priority for climate as well as our priority for gender. So I think you're going to see more of that in the future. And I also think that you're going to see more of the sort of challenge modality going forward. So we actually just launched, for if there are any Mongolians on here, this call, we actually just launched one for Mongolia. And it's going to be a small contract for 25,000. And it's going to be tied to our partnership day that we're doing in September. So I think this is a modality that our teams are increasingly exploring, because they recognize that, sitting here in Manila, we don't have the answers, right? And it's oftentimes local groups who know exactly what the problems are and what the potential solutions are that are sort of best placed to do those. So I think we're going to see that modality being used a lot more. So I would, for all the organizations on here, that's probably the closest thing that we have to grant making at the moment. And so I would keep an eye on that page. And then for your third question for INGOs and also national offices, I have to check with our procurement department, but I would personally say hedge your bets, right? So register on the international side and then also register the local office on the national side, because then that means you're eligible for both contracts. So I'm happy to get a solid answer for you on that from our procurement people, but that would be my recommendation. Oh, Jiyoung, I lost you. Did you have any follow-on questions to that?
Oh, no, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And
Okay.
then we have, so I'll follow up with the suggestion and yeah, later. Thank you.
Yeah. If you can just send me a note, we'll circulate the PowerPoint, my email's on there, but yeah, send me a note with any suggestions and then I will get you an answer on the INGO versus international versus local. Okay, perfect. Okay, Vicente, let's go over to you.
Hi, Marina. Good morning. Have a blessed day to each every one of us here. I do have some minor questions and
Sure.
maybe. Uh, by the way, I'm representing the Wolf Philippines Organization Incorporated. We are aiming. We are focusing on environmental. Actually, in sector, we are newly. We focus on growing and planting trees as to rehabilitate or some bringing back the biodiversity in some areas here in Philippines. And one of my questions is pertaining with the partnership with ADB. Uh, do you accept or do you entertain that those NGOs like us, because we are newly organized and as of the moment we are just acquiring all our necessary permits and accreditations from government agencies. Because
Okay.
like SEC, Security Exchange Commission, and we are this Monday we are just been acknowledged by our local government units, is our in city in Valenzuela.
Mhm.
Do you accept as a partner the newly organized organization like us? And second question would be, because what benefits does the NGO gets from partnering with ADB projects?
Okay,
Those
cool.
are my questions. Just all two questions that I have.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And congratulations to your organization
Mhm.
for getting up and started. I know the paperwork, I'm here in the Philippines too. Sometimes the paperwork can be a lot.
Yes, actually,
So I wish you very good luck on that.
it took us 5 months to gather all those
All the
necessary
documents.
documents.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so just to clarify too, as an organization, ADB is massive, right? So we're, like I said, we're doing 23 billion in lending every single year. There is a lot going on. And so our ability to have lots of partnerships with organizations is very limited. Right. So we have a couple of MOUs with civil society groups, like WWF and Plan International, like very, very sort of selective MOUs. So I would say partnership is not really what we can do with many civil society organizations. But what we can do is the contracting and consulting opportunities that we were just talking about.
Mhm.
And in terms of benefits that I personally have seen for organizations for winning these. So first off, it's financially, it makes a lot of sense for a lot of organizations, right? So this
Yes.
goes back to the point about how in your bidding documents, you can include cost of overhead, right? So it's just
Mm.
sort of, it's operating more like a firm, right? But with a
Mhm.
social purpose. It's sort of like social enterprise, right? So you can include all of your overhead costs and everything, and we will include that into the contract. right? And so we
Okay.
are paying you for
Mhm.
that. And I think the other thing that's really beneficial is just because of the name of the organization, if you are able to win a contract from ADB, what we've seen with some of our other CSOs is then that helps them get grants from other institutions that offer grants. Or contracts from other institutions. So we've seen small organizations that have worked with us on different projects kind of leverage the name and say, look, I've been able to work with ADB. We had this contract. We did this community engagement. And then that gives oftentimes donors and grant funding mechanisms. Like, for example, the EU, I know, has done some. We've seen some. I think USAID too. They've said, okay, we want to work with you as a partner on the ground. So I think it leverages other opportunities as well. And so I do think these, I mean, again, it's kind of like a job, right? Like it's like having another line on your resume, that
Yeah,
allows you
correct.
to leverage it for something else. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. I get
Yeah.
I got it
Okay.
already. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, and then that's only my questions. I mean, all my concerns. Because thank you so much, and have a
Thank
lovely
you.
day to all of us here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lovely day to you too.
Our pleasure.
All right. Do we have any more hands up? I'm so sorry. I'm actually not going to, I kind of want to look at the questions in the chat, but there are so many. Seeing some. Oh, I see Diabetes Fiji. Over to you.
So this is just a follow-up questions based on the capacity building. That's I think you missed out to respond to that. Does ADB have programs in terms of capacity building directly for CSOs and NGOs as well?
Yeah, so we do not. I think that if you want to send me a note recommending that, then that is something that I think our team could consider. We don't provide, I think we could consider potentially something related to when you say capacity building, I've seen some other comments talking about, for example, preparing good bidding documents or how like capacity building in terms of like writing workshops, or is it that kind of what you're talking about, or are you talking about funding
Yes,
for internal capacity building for CSOs?
yes, this is for writing proposals in terms of funding, and also how we can be eligible to the requirements and
Okay,
based on the ADB in order for us to be successfully in
be able to
applicable.
successfully bid
Yeah,
on things. Yeah, okay. So so for that one, in terms of like writing workshops and how to properly structure proposals and how to structure, like the finances of bids, I think that is something that our group could potentially look into. So I would really appreciate if you could write me a note and just suggest that, then maybe that's something that we can take into consideration and try to develop. And happily be able to do that. What we don't do is providing funding for capacity building, if that makes sense. So we wouldn't provide a CSO with, say, $50,000 to improve their own internal processes, right? So that I feel like that's a key difference. But yeah, but on sort of the higher level, and we also, the other thing we can do is, if a CSO wins a contract or is going to work with us on a contract and they need some support in improving their own, for example, internal financial processes so that they can better meet the requirements of ADB, that's something else that we can do. But that would be on a sort of project by project basis. So, but please do send me a note on the kind of general capacity building in terms of teaching CSOs how to bid on these things, because that might be something we can take into consideration.
Renata.
Any other questions? Oh, I see. I'm looking and I'm seeing these questions. Okay, so so what we'll do is we will send around this presentation to all of our attendees today. please do use it as a reference. It does have our contact information there. So if you do want to reach out and have any questions, please do contact us. And then also, you know, as we were talking, with Diabetes Fiji and Jiyoung, you know, we are very open to suggestions. If you do have things that would help you, please do let us know. We will try our best to put together a good program so that our civil society groups know how to work with us, and also just to engage with us more generally in terms of policy and country programming. So please, our doors are open. We are here as a resource for you. Thank you all so much for attending today as well. And actually, sorry, before you go, I think we do have a survey. Shar and Sam, can we flash the survey up again? I think it maybe went on people. If you haven't completed the survey, please do, because then that'll help us do these better in the future. This is sort of the first one that we've ever done like this. So, okay, here we go. Okay, so here is the poll. So go ahead and fill this out again. Please do, particularly in the like written section, any suggestions that you have, we would love to hear them. And we hope that we'll have the opportunity to work with you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good Naka. Goodbye.
So let's go to the Q&A then as you're completing the evaluation. So any hands up in terms of questions? Everybody, if you're putting the questions in the chat, if you're comfortable, if you could please raise your hand, because there's a lot in the chat at the moment. And I've also been talking quite a bit. Okay. All right, Saeed, let's go to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very useful.
Good.
Thank you. Well, I just, we have already been working on some submissions for the ADB. We are already registered on your portal, so it's been quite useful. There were some questions which we have already raised in the chat box. I'm not sure whether you'll be looking into it. I just wanted to know whether do you publish any schedules for the civil society partnership days that you mark in different countries? Is there any date for the upcoming civil society day in Pakistan?
Okay, that's a great question. So our partnership days are actually still in pilot. We did one in Bhutan and we're doing one in Mongolia in September. I think Pakistan would be a great next location. I think that would be fantastic, but we just haven't gotten there yet. But I'm happy to take that back to the team and mention we can put Pakistan at sort of the top of the list for maybe one of our countries that we could consider doing this in. The problem is we just have too many countries. Okay, and then we'll also take a look, what we might do is take the questions that you had, I know you said that you had submitted some in the chat. So what we'll do is we'll synthesize those and try to answer them. And texting, maybe what we can do is we can sort of email out our answers after this presentation so that we can provide you with that information. Mubarak, let's go over to you.
Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. I'm Mubarak, representing a National Civil Society organization, that is Agahi, from Pakistan. Is it any preferred list of countries for ADB?
In terms of where we where we can hire consultants from?
Yeah.
Yeah. So consultants or firms. Yeah. So so for most of our projects, it needs to be an ADB member country. So if you remember that, do you remember the map that I showed within the presentation and showing kind of Asia and the Pacific, and then on the side was a list of non-regional countries, so the European countries, the United States and Canada. So in order to be able to be eligible for ADB opportunities, you need to come from a member country. I will say Pakistan is most certainly a member country. So your organization, I believe if your organization is based in Pakistan, then you would most certainly be eligible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Mustaqima.
Hi, thank you for giving me the opportunity, and congratulate your presentation was really very helpful and informative. And this is first time for me in these sorts of webinar. So actually, if I'm not sure, I'm repeating the question, but I am a little bit interested to know, do you have any preference area? Area means any theme that you want to focus in next 1 or 2 years? Because I know ADB also work on education and in many other themes. So do you have any preferable theme for next 2 years?
Yeah. So I think, our goal as an institution, sort of the primary theme that we are focusing on is climate. Our president has made the commitment that we are going to be the climate bank of Asia and the Pacific. So and half our portfolio now is being sort of tagged as climate lending. So climate is the big theme that we care about at the moment. But that doesn't mean that everything is climate, right? So we do have dedicated teams across a number of sectors. So that's transport, energy, health, education, social protection, water projects, urban services projects. So, we do still have all of these sectors, also governance. And then in terms of other themes, for example, we do have a strong focus on gender. So we have an entire gender team dedicated to improving the lives of women across Asia and the Pacific. So I would say climate is the big one, but we are still operating in all of these other areas as well.
Thank you.
Most welcome. Thank you. Yusra, how about we go to you?
Thank you so much for this session. Just a question about, so for countries like Myanmar, like Afghanistan, where technically there is no government to communicate with, there is no ADB presence on ground, how would you advise CSOs and NGOs to engage with ADB?
Yeah, that's a really tricky question. And I actually don't know that I am personally comfortable with answering it because I don't know the full answer. That's our Fragility conflict colleagues. As you know, in both countries, it's been so difficult. And I believe that we're reopening our offices in both countries and looking to start engaging in projects again there. But it's just, I think I'm going to have to put that into the FAQ and get back to you on that. I do know in Afghanistan, we've primarily been working through UN agencies. Yes, but if it's okay, I will come back to you with a better answer on that. Sorry.
No worries. Thank you.
Let's go to Deo and Alpe.
Hi, Marina. Thank you so much. It was a great presentation. My question is, given the projects given by the Asian Development Bank to CSOs, are there any case studies or reports available that highlight the impact of CSOs' involvement in ADB projects?
Yeah. So the primary one is going to be, if you take a look at our annual reports, you can find that on our website. And we've done them every single year. We have an indicator that specifically tracks CSO engagement across the institution. And that indicator was revised in 2020. So you'd be able to see kind of be able to compare over time back to 2020. But that indicator shows the types of engagement and the number of projects that delivered civil society engagement across the institution. It also has a lot of sort of anecdotes and stories and case studies about civil society engagement. So I would highly recommend that project or that knowledge product to be able to get a sense of the overall picture.
All right. Thank you, Marina.
Thank you. Let's go to Abdul.
Hi, Marina. This is Abdul. I'm from Sri Lanka. I'm from a startup called Impact Voices, which is a social media intermediary. So this practice is quite new for us. So I would like to know. My first question is, as a first-time entrant, we also like to bid for projects. What are the areas that you think we must prioritize now as a first entrant? We are yet to register as a consulting firm.
Yeah, I mean, I think a good strategy is always to apply as many things as possible. And so one of the nice things about your CMS profile is that you can sort of submit expressions of interest because your profile's saved, right? And I would take a look, as long as you meet those minimum requirements for the postings, I would say just do it, because the trick is getting your foot in the door, because oftentimes one consulting opportunity leads to another. I would say smaller programs, there's probably a higher chance that there will be less organizations applying to those. So, if it's a smaller amount and not one of these big tenders, then that's probably a better chance as well. Yeah, so I would just have as many irons in the fire as possible. And if you're based in Sri Lanka, I'm guessing you'll be looking for sort of Sri Lanka, you'd be applying as a national firm. So, go through those tender pages and filter for national positions within Sri Lanka. And that should pull up everything for you.
Great, thanks so much.
Thanks, Abdul. Let's go to Gafar.
Hello, Marina. Can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for the nice presentation. As you mentioned in the beginning that ADB provides loans to the government, to the countries. My question is that are there any examples where ADB provides loans to the organizations for various purposes? Because I'm asking this question because my organization is implementing a multi-million-dollar microfinance program for small farmers and small enterprises.
Okay.
And we do get costly credit lines from commercial banks. And so I was thinking that, for example, if we get a low interest rate loans from ADB, then the benefit can be transferred to the small farmers and the enterprises. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question, and it's a really nice one. So there's kind of two ways that we oftentimes do what we call them financial intermediary loans. So oftentimes that goes through the sovereign, where we lend money to the government, and then the government selects different banks to do oftentimes micro lending. So the money goes to the government gives it to the bank on lends and for micro loans. And that would require getting to know the government that's going to do one of these programs. But the other option is going through what we call our non-sovereign operations team. And so this is the team. It's a much smaller portion of our portfolio than sovereign lending. But this is the team that normally lends to private sector clients. So I think in this case, a civil society group would be treated as a private sector client. That's something that I think one day in the future, we need to address kind of social enterprises and better lending rates for them. We just aren't there yet. But if you want to send me if you can send me an email, I would be happy to connect you to our non-sovereign team and see sort of whether they can put you in touch with the right person to potentially see if you can structure something that would work for your organization.
Yeah, sure. I would be happy to send the email. Where can I get the email from you?
Yeah, so it's on the presentation, but maybe I'll just let me put it in the chat right here so you all have it. Okay. All right, so it's just in the chat there.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so let's go to Said Hassan. Oh, you're on mute.
Hi, Ms. Rose, can you hear me? Thank you.
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. For the first time, actually, we found out the process is quite smooth and simple if you try it. I wanted to ask about if you had some focal person in Pakistan's office on inclusion, specifically on including the person with disabilities in the development or humanitarian mainstream, and especially Handicap International in Pakistan leads a couple of forums, including women in DRR and aging and disability task force. So we were thinking if there is such a person, we could you could match us up with them, or we could approach them and maybe see how this goes and find out collaboration or cooperation opportunities.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, Hassan. So I think the best point of contact for you would be the CSO anchor. So in Pakistan, his name is Khurram, and you can find his contact information on the website like we were looking at. So we do have a focus on disability. We have a team here at headquarters focused on inclusion and disability. And typically within our resident missions, we have points of contact who focus on these things as well. For Pakistan specifically, I don't know who that exact person is, but if you contact Khurram, he should be able to direct you to them.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's go to Said Safi.
Hi, this is Asif. I'm sitting next to Said Safi. My question is, we recently submitted a bid, but we are not able to track it. It's not being shown on our portal. So if you allow me, I can share my screen and I can quickly show you.
Sure, let's do it.
I can share my screen if you allow me.
Yeah, sure. I don't know if that's possible. Oftentimes the it doesn't really show. Do you know how long it's been?
Just like this one. So here we have our profile, but I'm not able to see the opportunity that we have applied for.
That's odd.
One of the colleague from ADB was saying that we can see it under the profile, but
okay,
I'm not able to see that.
Okay, why don't you, can you send me, I just shared my email. Can you send me an email just indicating this, and then I'll put you in touch with someone who can help you troubleshoot?
Oh,
The
that's
other thing,
fantastic.
yeah. So we can try to help you troubleshoot that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Okay, Krishna, how about over to you?
Thanks, Marina, for the wonderful presentation. I have a question around the regional programming. Does ADB encourage regional programming for the CSOs? For example, I represent Oxfam here, and Oxfam has work across many countries in Asia. So if we want to do a program which is based in Bangladesh as well as based in Cambodia, is that possible?
Well, it would really depend on, because we aren't doing grants, it wouldn't be up to the organization to structure things, right? Because we're doing consulting opportunities, it would have to come from the government or internally at ADB requesting a regional program that the CSO would then apply for. So from a regional perspective, we have several regional programs within the institution. So for, I'm sorry, you said Bangladesh and?
That was just an example.
Okay. Okay.
If we like, because we are working in many countries across Asia.
I see. Okay.
So that was just an example that I stated.
Yeah, so we do we have a number of regional sort of cooperation and integration programs. So we have the CARIC program, which covers Central Asian countries. We have the CSEC program, which covers South Asia. We do a lot with ASEAN. So there's a number of programs that that are regional in nature. And so though any sort of opportunities that would be available for those would be posted just with every other opportunity. I'm going to, I want to look to see if, because you might even be able to filter for sort of regional, right? But it would be sort of under, okay, so for example, even here, I'm seeing regional program. Yeah, and if you look at that work with us page, the projects and tenders, within the filter results, in addition to filtering by country, you can also filter for regional. So you would be able to see what regional opportunities are there. And then an organization like Oxfam might have a competitive advantage in bidding on programs like that, because you do have the in-country presence in so many countries, and you are kind of doing this as an organization yourself. So I would think that those would be very attractive sort of opportunities.
Thanks, Marina.
Yep. Thanks so much, Krishna. Let's go to Lalaruk.
Hi, Marina.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for the insight. It was very insightful. Just a quick question regarding the CSO competition. You mentioned that the CSOs shall compete with the corporate firms. But for the prices, they can claim the salaries and the overhead. So just a little bit, I need an explanation on that the bid will be on the total project budget, while the salaries and overheads will be claimed separately, right?
Yeah, so it would be the cost. I mean, so like when you're doing bidding on projects, I mean, you have to incorporate all of the costs that your organization is expected to incur while doing that project, right? So the private sector would break that down in terms of, here's the cost for the project itself, here's the cost for our administrator, and here's our profit margin, right? So where you can compete, where civil society groups can compete on cost is oftentimes the cost of that a CSO would be less than, say McKinsey, right? McKinsey's horrible. They cost so much. They're so expensive. So civil society groups can often do sort of like put out just as good outputs, but they don't charge as much. So there's a lot more value for money. But within your bidding documents, oftentimes when we receive bids for different things, you know, like you want to include the total breakdown of cost, right? So it's not just 25,000 flat, right? Oh, we'll do this for that. Like when you are actually breaking down the costs of your bid, you can include for example, your rent on your office, because that's a cost that you incur just for existing, and that ADB would then be able to pay for if you do win the contract, right? So I would just include everything. But I think even if you do include everything, you're still going to be competitive sort of with a private sector company. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'll sum it up that I'll compete on the total value while giving you a breakup of my overheads.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Just a reminder, we will take the questions in the chat. We are going to take them and sort of synthesize them into FAQs. So we'll be sending around this entire presentation. At the end of the presentation, we do have screenshots of kind of what I was showing you about CMS and also identifying the projects and tenders, so that hopefully will be easily accessible. So we'll send this around to you along with those, and then maybe follow on with those FAQs. Okay, and then just a reminder, if you do still have your evaluation up on your screen, please do fill that out. We are trying to improve for the future. So this would help us so much if you were able to tell us what you thought, what we could improve, what we can do better. We are here for you. And with that, I'm going to say thank you so much to everybody. I hope you all have a great day. We hope to hear from you soon. We hope you bid on opportunities. We hope you win those opportunities. So good luck to you all, and let us know if you need anything. All right. Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Marina.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.